Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to our Road Safety Capacity Building webinar series number 3. And today we're going to be focusing on the private sector and partnerships and how this can help us enhance road safety and financing. So before we get started properly, Mark, if we can move to the next slide. For all our Russian-speaking colleagues, we do have Russian interpretation available. So for everyone, if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a globe-looking icon where it says interpretation. Please click on that and select the language that you prefer, and you'll be able to hear any relevant translations for you. Excellent. And we move on, please, Mark. So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone. This road safety capacity building webinar series, number 3, is kindly brought to you by the Asia Pacific Road Safety Observatory, the APRSO, and the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation, the CAREC program, and of course, the Asian Development Bank, the ADB. And the grant funding that is used to support this capacity building series was kindly received from the Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia and the Pacific, financed by the government of Japan through the Asian Development Bank. So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Jessica Trung and I'm from Lersninger, a Vision Zero planning organisation, and I am going to be your moderator today. So for those of you that have joined us before, you will know that this is the 3rd edition of our capacity building webinar series that we've been running this year. And this particular series number 3, is focusing on financing, which is a follow-up from the conference theme of the Asia Pacific Road Safety Conference that was held in Manila in September. So as you can see on this slide, in this particular 3rd edition, we've got 4 separate webinar sessions focusing on a different aspect of financing. And in today's webinar session, we'll be focusing on private sector and partnerships and examine what opportunities we have for private sector to contribute to road safety and how building partnerships can help enhance road safety outcomes. And if we move to the next slide, please, Mark, you will see that I'm very pleased that we've got some great experts from around the globe joining us today to help share their expertise on what are the importance of financing and private sector involvement, and also the importance of partnerships. So we have Liz Waller, who is the head of road safety from Transurban, joining us from Australia. We also have Jerome Carslake, the Program Director of the National Road Safety Partnership, also joining us from Australia. And we're very pleased to also have Ken Nishino, the Manager of the Transportation Planning Division of the Overseas Department from Almec Corporation, joining us from Japan. So a very warm welcome to all 3 of our speakers today. You'll be able to hear from each of our experts where they'll be able to present on their areas. And then, as usual, we'll then move into a question and answer section. As usual, you'll notice at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a question and answer button that you can click on, and we encourage you to utilize that button and ask any questions that you have of our speakers. And of course, if you have any answers to the questions, please also feel free to utilize that and provide your perspective on the questions that are being posed. Use that button and also use the chat function to interact with each other and build some relationships there as well. And we'll try to pick up on those questions and answers either directly by the speakers or during the Q&A section that we'll have at the end. Your microphone will be muted unless you're invited to speak. And during the Q&A, if you do have a question that you want to ask live, just raise your hand and we will be able to invite you to come join us live. So that's some very quick housekeeping, and I hope you enjoyed today. And we're going to move into our very first presentation, and I'm very pleased to once again welcome Liz Waller from Transurban to share with us on her perspective on public-private partnerships. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you, Jess. It's really pleasing to be here today, and thank you all for joining. If we can go to the next slide, please. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of Transurban so that you can have some context about who we are and what we do. So we are an Australian-owned company and listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. We build and operate toll roads in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane in Australia, as well as some roads in the Greater Washington area in the United States, excuse me, and Montreal in Canada. So we are one of the leading toll road operators across the globe, but everything that we do works to get people where they want to be quickly and safely as possible. And that means that we incorporate safe design right into the whole life cycle, from the designing, construction of new roads, and also continuing to research other areas of transportation, such as vehicles and the new technologies and how that can interact with infrastructure and support the safety of people using the network on our roads, but also on the broader network. We opened our first road or asset in 1999, and that is CityLink in Melbourne. And since then, we've opened another 22 roads or assets, and we support these roads with around 4,000 employees. We are about to open our 23rd road, and that again is in Melbourne, and that's the Westgate Tunnel project, and I'll touch a bit on that soon. But as you can see on the screen, we have 11.3 million customers globally. They save close to 500,000 hours of travel time every workday by moving themselves on high-speed urban roadways, and we get them to do that safely. Next slide, please, Mark. So I just want to give you a bit of an overview of why we adopted the safe system approach. And I think that many of you or most of you will understand the principles and the way that this works together, and have seen many diagrams in many conferences or in your readings. And the diagram on this slide is the one that we have developed, and how we integrate that with the purpose of our company, which is around making the link between people, places and progress. So this sits at the heart of what we do. It applies to our strategic principles around growth and efficiency and stakeholder engagement. And then it also relates to the values that our people abide by in their work. And so we always start with our customer. We show up with an open mind, so we're really interested in the way that the safe system can apply to our roads, and to how we engage more broadly with the transport sector. We solve it together, so it's not just about us. We're part of a whole tapestry of transportation, and then we set the standard. So our aim is always to lead into this space, to be setting great examples of safety, about how you can operate safe infrastructure, how you can continually improve. And I'll go into a bit of this soon about some other things to do with the way that we've applied the safe system approach. Next slide, please, Mark. So this is really the key, or the crux of how we embed road safety into a private road company. And so firstly, it's around that infrastructure. So it's applying that safe system approach, as I've mentioned, but also doing that integrated with human factors, knowing how people use the roads, and those who shouldn't be using high-speed roads is just as important. We consistently look at innovation and technology to support drivers or motorists or motorcyclists or truck drivers in the way that they use the network and interact with each other. And then we align all of our activities with the national road safety strategies in the countries where we operate, and the local ones in the states in which we operate. And all of those have been based on the safe system approach as well. And that goes again to the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So everything sort of comes out and flows down. So when we're looking at how we build and operate and conduct our business, it's within frameworks that are globally recognised, and that way it's an excellent way of being able to communicate with the key stakeholders and how we get to progress and develop our business further. We operate the network every day. We have 24/7 traffic control rooms run by really experienced and well-trained network operators. So they have eyes on the road 24/7. Then we also have our roadside technologies, and we use those technologies very intricately in understanding the volume of traffic and the type of traffic that's on our roads. We use things like automatic incident detections. We can see when cyclists are on our network and they shouldn't be, when pedestrians are on there, when vehicles have broken down, when congestion is building. So those roadside technologies are an amazing way to be able to run safe roads, and it doesn't have to apply to high-speed toll roads, and it can apply to any road. And then we have incident response, which we make available to anybody on our network, and that's free because you do have to pay to use the road. And so we have set ourselves some really targets around how we respond as well, and measure and keep ourselves really accountable to those targets. Importantly, we've got an enterprise road safety action plan, which is aligned with a safe system approach and those pillars. This is the actions that we put into that are really data driven. So there's a very strong evidence as to what is going to go into that plan, and we align that plan with our asset lifecycle management program. So that includes our major maintenance program, our technology transport replacement program, around our transport modelling, so knowing where the growth is in our cities, and then modelling that for not just being able to have people go through safely on the network and get onto our roads safely and exit safely, but also how that we can manage things like congestion and the like. And then we also have in those plans a lot around stakeholder engagement and the partnerships, because we just can't do this by ourselves. And that goes straight to safe system principles, of course. And the key thing for me and my team is really about this capability development. So my team is actually quite small. In a company of around 4,000 people, they're a very small team of 3 people, and we integrate ourselves into the business to lift that capability of other teams, so that road safety sits right at the heart of everything that they do as well. We run roads, so road safety obviously is critical. And so we work with them around our public education campaigns, how we do research, and how we partner with our government agencies and the like. And we think that when we put all of these together, then that's how we build and maintain our road safety leadership and really our licence to operate. And our aim is to eliminate fatalities and serious injury crashes from our network. And we do pretty well, and I'll talk a bit about that at the end. So the next slide, please, Mark. So some of the benefits of public-private partnerships, it's the ability of governments to work with the private sector and create city-shaping infrastructure, and that's really critical to the prosperity and livability of cities. And so the picture you see on this slide is the Westgate Tunnel that I mentioned at the start of the presentation. This is, it's called the tunnel, but the tunnel's a few kilometres long, and it goes out to the west at one end of the city, and it comes into the north and connects with CityLink and also the Westgate Freeway. And this project has taken many years to build, and you can see that that sort of structure at the background is the entry, is the exit to from the tunnel coming in from the west. And then the filtration system is the sort of the white silver stack that you can see at the back. So this has been it's a true city shaping piece of infrastructure. There's multiple dozens of bridges built across a river that goes out. So this is just part of it. But when you see this, that means that government's able then to invest money into other social and societal things, whether it's education or public transport or health, so that the funding is used for transport through a public-private partnership. And we know that they do free up the balance sheet for other priorities. And an example of this is in Sydney alone, we've invested around $36 billion and that's over the last 2 decades. So that's $36 billion that government hasn't had to invest to keep the road network operating, maintained, and to a very high standard in terms of its life cycle and, most importantly, its safety. And so it just means that, you know, the things that we learn from here doesn't stop with us. It actually goes back in. So our partnerships with government are critical, because if you nobody ever works in a silo, and it just means as well that that you build that confidence with government, and you can then continue to invest in things, whether it's an upgrade, whether it's more technology, how you link in technology between public roads and private roads and the like. Next slide, please, Mark. So the next one I was going to talk about is the outcome. So this is really my last slide. And I mentioned earlier that we don't operate in isolation. You know, we are part of the broader transport network across all of the cities where we operate. And we're very focused on sharing data and insights. And I just mentioned that a bit earlier. And some examples of that are that understanding the new technologies that are coming out of automated enforcement. So we're interested in that on our networks as well. So we don't, you know, that's always a government investment, but we want that to be, you know, available across all roads. And so we talk to them a lot, and then we can share data with them. Of course, it's you know, it's anonymous. We don't have data, you know, around actually individual vehicles, but we can look at speed profiles, we can look at vehicle types, we can look at times of day, we can look at our crash data, and we can look at things like near-miss data that we're using a lot, because we do have quite low crashes compared to the broader network. But using sort of almost proxy data to crash data is very useful, and it helps us also evaluate interventions that we might put on our network. So a good example of that is we had a lot of congestion coming off the back of an exit ramp, and that was holding up traffic and causing crashes before they entered into our tunnel. So it was actually off asset. It wasn't even on part of our network. And so we worked with putting in new technology to manage what we call the back of queue, so all of the spill back and the build up that was causing the rear end crashes, and sometimes side swipe crashes where people would try and exit that queue. So we put in this technology solution, and, you know, crashes reduced by 75%, but we could also see the harsh braking and the harsh manoeuvring reduce really significantly because we put that solution in. And then we can use that as evidence for government to also use on their roads, and also for us to look at how that could be applied on other parts of our network, whether that's in Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane or overseas in one of our roads in the US or Canada. So we're also building things like integrated data bases. So that might be the roadside data from our systems, just like this back of queue solution. It could incorporate weather data, the near-miss data, and then link that up with also data like that we get out of our IRAP ratings. So all of those things can be put together and to improve safety. And then again, that's the investment that we put into this. It is a benefit back to our government partners, and most importantly to our customers, because they have confidence that they're travelling on really safe roads, that something goes wrong, we can see it, something goes wrong or they need some support, we've got incident response out there. So there's a whole lot of things about how all of this joins up together. We've got, from a transparency point of view, we've set ourselves some KPIs around road safety. So one is our road injury crash index, and we measure the number of serious injury crashes by vehicle kilometres travelled, or 100 million vehicle kilometres travelled, which is a standard measure in road safety. We don't have a target for that. We don't think we should be aiming for people to be crashing and hurting themselves. So we set ourselves thresholds, which we're aiming to come down year on year on year. And then we report that. That gets reported to our shareholders because we are a publicly listed company. It contributes to our ESG reporting. It responds to the Sustainable Development Goals, and it contributes to the national and the state's road safety strategies. And then the Road Safety Action Plan I talked to you about earlier, that's the mechanism that we use to support the reduction in our, what we call RICI, that Road Injury Crash Index. We put all of this information into our annual report every year. And then, you know, what it does do is it drives engagement in our business about the performance of the network and how we operate it and how we keep it safe. And this is from the most senior person in our organisation, our Chief Executive Officer, right down to those people who would be in our call centres. And then the last thing I just want to say is that what we do to, again, invest in our network and report back is we have IRAPed all of our roads. And you can see on the slide that 91% of the Australian network is rated 4 stars or higher. And one of our tunnels in Sydney we rated recently, and it's 5-star for 100%. So it goes to show that the investment, and when you do partner with a private sector, that there's things that you can do, and you can insert requirements into contracts about how you expect the network to be built. So one of the big projects that we've done recently was that, there was a condition in that contract that said it must be built to safe system principles. And then, building that way you do build capability of the industry. So the designers and the contractors and the auditors and everybody else is really getting, far more familiar with safe system as a concept, and then the actual application of it. And then we also have, and then 63% of our network in the US is at 4-star or better as well. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that we do have Monash University Accident Research Centre. They're based in Melbourne but globally recognised for their road safety expertise. They undertake an analysis of all of our roads in Australia and compare them to like roads, so roads that perform the same function, have about the same volume in traffic. And then what they have found is that our roads are at least twice as safe as like roads. And in a couple of areas, they're up to 3.5 times as safe. So I'll leave it there, but I'm sure that there may be some questions, or and I look forward to having that question and answer time later on. Thanks, Jess.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, Liz. And I think this is a great example of a government-private sector partnership that has generated significant road safety financing benefits for the state and for the government. I'm from Melbourne, Australia myself, and I've spent a lot of time on these transurban roads that Liz have spoken about, and they are very high quality roads. And I think one thing that you mentioned as a part of your presentation that really struck me, Liz, is the 36 million, I think you said, that was invested in Sydney. That is
Billion.
36 billion.
Billion.
Sorry. I
I'm
totally
pretty sure it was
underestimated that.
billion. I'm sure it was. So let me just look at my notes. But
36 billion. I mean,
yeah.
I think what you mentioned was that is 36 billion that the Australian government now doesn't have to look for to actually upgrade our roads to keep it safe
Yeah.
for all our road users. And that money can now be freed up to use for other parts of the network that's not managed by Transurban. And I think that's a really good example of how private sector investment in road safety can have significant benefits for the government and for the community as a whole. And
That's right.
I love that it's embedded in safe system principles, because that's what we like to see. I've got a lot of questions for you, and I'll save that for the Q&A section. But we'll please, for all our participants as well, if you've got any questions, please do pop them into the Q&A box, and we'll get back to them later. And Liz will also jump on and have a look as well.
Yeah. Could I just answer the one that's come up, if that's okay, Jess, very quickly?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So this one is about incorporating road safety interventions and which bear additional costs, and how does that affect your chances of winning a bid in a competitive environment? My best answer to this is that it doesn't have to cost any more. So when you're creating that project, you need to be there at the very start of having road safety integrated, not something that you build a project, oh, we better get the road safety people in, because it's very cost effective to get the right interventions in, whether it's barriers or enforcement technologies or line marking or whatever you're going to do, and signage and the technologies that you will need. If you can get those in at the front and demonstrate the benefit of those, then you can actually demonstrate the cost savings through the life cycle. So it doesn't have to cost more. In fact, the way to do it is actually to demonstrate that in the bid and to show the value and the competitive advantage of having that as part of the cost.
Thank you so much for that, Liz. And I couldn't agree more. I think it is a bit of a fallacy when people think that safety has to be expensive. And as Liz explained, it doesn't have to if you factor it into the design, whether it's the roads, the vehicles. Once you design it right, the safety outcomes continue to and benefits continue to accumulate. But on the other hand, we actually can't afford to not factor in safety because it actually ends up costing us more in the long run, whether it's with injuries or fatalities and all that. And also retrofitting safety becomes very expensive. So if we do it right, it doesn't necessarily have to cost more. So thank you for that, Liz. And I can see that there are many more questions coming up for you. So please jump on the Q&A session later on, which will follow up on some of these, and also have a look at the Q&A box and see if there's anything you can answer now. Thanks again, Liz. We'll catch up with you in a little bit. Now, Liz has highlighted, one of the most important partnerships that we see in road safety, which is the government to private sector partnership. So I'm going to ask Mark to bring up our first poll question. I sort of want to understand from your perspective, which type of partnership do you think is most critical for road safety financing? So we've got some options listed there that you can select from, or you can choose all of the above, or you can choose other, and you can expand on that as in the chat. So while you're filling in that poll, I am going to take this opportunity to introduce our next speaker, who is Jerome Carslake from the National Road Safety Partnership Program. And we're very pleased to have Jerome joining us all the way from Australia also to talk about how private sector involvement and also the partnerships that are generated in road safety can help have significant benefits. So over to you, Jerome.
Thank you so much for that, Jess, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today and present. And I just want to echo the points that Jess and Liz were making around, I guess, the investment side of things with regards to road safety. A lot of the stuff I'm going to focus on and talk about is, I guess, making those right decisions up front, because it's a very expensive thing to do later on once you've made that decision. And some things are impossible to fix afterwards, which is quite often when you invest and get the wrong sort of vehicle in. So I'm talking about the program, how we're going to go about how we sort of function. Let's dive on in. So,
Jerome, just a reminder, just to speak a little bit slower,
slow
please.
down. Sorry about that.
Thank
I got
you.
to remember. That's all right. I will work a lot harder at talking slower. So what I'm going to take us through today is I'm going to touch on, well, why does this really matter to businesses? And then delve into the opportunities of workplace road safety, really explore the framework of NRSP and how it provides, I guess, it's really the mortar that brings us all together and enables collaboration. I'll provide some examples as well. So I'm just touching on some bits and pieces as we move along. For those of you who haven't really considered the vehicle as a workplace, it's the leading cause of road trauma, trauma in workplace fatalities in Australia. It's easily 50%. And I think it's an underestimate as well, because in a lot of cases, we don't sort of see or know or report fully on some of the vehicles that go through. They get picked up by what we call our compulsory third-party scheme. But when you look at it, it's so far in front of everything else, work-related fatalities that involve a vehicle. Key thing is it chews around 60 to 70% of resources in emergency services. And because when people are involved in road trauma, it impacts so much more of the body when they go through it all. And the other part, if you look at the ability of businesses to influence the purchasing of vehicles, when they actually bring them in and they flow into the system, around 30% account of our vehicles are registered motor vehicles for businesses and that sort of purposes. So that's a large portion. And when you think about it, when a vehicle is purchased, it sits in the system in Australia for around 20 odd years. So that first decision, when it comes in, if you can make the right one, it can have a lasting impact, because the average age of the fleet in Australia is around 12.3 years currently. If we look at the occupational light vehicles, they sort of comprise up to sort of 5.3 fatalities per 100,000 registered vehicle fleet. So from a business perspective, it makes sense. But the hard part is a lot of organisations, it's out of sight, out of mind. So when people are driving their vehicles, for a lot of organisations, it doesn't exist. They focus on the factory floor. They go all through those sort of elements. And I guess one of the hard things as well for an organisation point of view is 85% of people think they're above average drivers. So how do you engage them if you know everything about driving? How do you take them on the journey and teach them those sort of components and improve them in that sort of sense? Because you drive all the time. A lot of people think because they've never been involved in an incident, they're fantastic behind the wheel. So for businesses, when you look at a lot of people are focused in the sort of top area from a business point of view, the quantifiable costs, the insurance costs, and that's what they allocate. This is what it's costing our businesses. But there's an enormous hidden component that sits behind the scheme. And that's where we sort of come in and try to highlight that element. So for every dollar that sort of goes out from an insurable point of view, there's usually between $8 to $53 in additional losses to the organisation. And that's easily quantifiable. So you think about that, that could be someone time off work, injured, extent of the vehicles, all those sort of things, morale, performance. How do you fill all those components in as you go through it all? And when you begin looking at what that number is beyond that, beyond just the insured, it begins making good business sense. But this is just really the real cost. When you begin thinking about the productivity, the efficiency, the benefits, it's really a safe investment, and that's what I'll touch on in the tick as we go along. So what sort of levers exist in workplace road safety? Now, a lot of organisations and people think it's just the driving for work angle. Professional drivers, they're the only ones that they're the touch points that you can sort of focus on. But it's far, far larger than that. And that can be from professional driver, light vehicle driver, grey fleet. For those who haven't heard the term grey fleet, it's when a person uses a work-related purposes that's not owned by the organisation. And in Australia, they have the same legal responsibility and duty of care to provide a safe workplace to them as they do in a vehicle that they own. Now, if you go beyond that, there's then the commuter, the general workers, which is basically our entire workforce. And there's an opportunity to really engage them, to get them to share the responsibility for road safety. The next scale after that is corporate social responsibility. And that's when organisations can begin saying, well, what can I do with my touch points into the community, those sort of elements, levers. And I think Liz touched on a lot of sort of great examples that a company like Transurban's doing, who lives and breathes the road, but also saying how do they reach out and use their ability to give back into the community in that sort of sense. And I think increasingly as organisations are beginning to understand, I guess, the size and the risk of road safety, they begin to see how they can go through. But personally, I think one of the most powerful elements that is unrealised is contracts. And if you set a contract term, and whenever that's set up, if you can integrate some form of performance around road safety, what that looks like, whether that could be vehicle selection, driver performance, route selection, engagement with community, build that all into the contracts at the outset for anyone. It can be major infrastructure projects, it can be right down to deliveries, those sort of components. Once it's built into the contract and you very carefully point out how you're going to measure that performance, that becomes the benchmark. And that can quite often go above and beyond what the floor set in place by the normal regulations. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful unrealised forces that can be used. And I'll touch on that a little bit later on as an example that's really taken off in Australia that we're sort of using in a positive way. So why should this matter so much for an organisation engaging their workers? Now, what I wanted to touch on is if you want to sit there and you think about it from a life satisfaction point of view, and the research is really clear on this as well, is the way people drive directly relates to how they live their lives. Now, if you think about when people are out and a bit of a diagram sitting around, if someone can be engaged, if they can have meaning, if they can have pleasure in their lives, their life satisfaction score goes right up through the roof. And then the organisation, as work is a central tenet for a lot of people, if you can then say, well, how am I going to focus and engage my workers? How am I going to give them meaning and purpose for what they're doing, but also how to reward them and give them pleasure for what they're doing at the same time, the life satisfaction scores will go right up. And driver violations go down. as an example, if you look at probably the high-risk cohorts of people, of drivers, young people, young males in particular, the big things out of whack for them is their pleasure sort of thing, so they can push the limits, drive them on them, which is why we quite often talk about how do you engage them and give that empathy sort of pillar to them and draw them in for meaning. And if you can really engage in that sort of sense, you can bring them back and actually sort of really influence how they're sort of performing. So this is what we sort of talk about when we try we do whole workshops with a lot of businesses talking about these sort of elements in a lot more detail. So this is where the NRSP comes in. So the National Road Safety Partnership Program, Liz touched on the safe systems, and that's one of the key things which underpins the program. As you can sort of see, you can see there's 4 sort of pillars sitting there. The NRSP aligns with the National Road Safety Strategy, and then basically we have our sort of 4 elements that sit around that feeds into the program. And I'll just delve into them deeper in a tick. Now, the key component that enables the NRSP.
Jerome.
Yep.
Sorry, Jerome. Do you mind slowing down just a little bit more? Thank you.
I will. Sorry about that. So the program is funded by Australia's major states and the ACT government. And what that means is it ensures that everything is open, everything is public, everything is freely available. And the program is hosted by Monash University Accident Research Centre, which Liz mentioned earlier. And that ensures that everything is evidence-based and focused on how, when we talk about it, when you know it, it comes from a trusted source of truth. And I guess the key thing I want to highlight here also is the diversity of our steering committee. When you look at all those organisations sitting there, very, very different. But when you begin talking about workplace road safety and related risk, the measures are exactly the same. So when you think about a bank through to the big BHP, through to toll group, through to Sodexo moving people around, we're talking about very, very similar risks, different scales. But when you begin doing knowledge transfer between them all and they begin sharing, there's different ideas can flow across. So it sort of breaks down the silos. And that's exactly what NRSP's purpose is. We're not focused by mode, by medium, or by a sector. We try and bridge the gap and bring groups together to share and collaborate around common problems, which are driven by data that flows up to our steering committee. And then once they're identified as a problem area, we then pull together a diverse group and begin exploring it. And then if there's need, we'll then begin moving forward as to how we can explore that in more detail. I guess some of the key principles is that all the partners realise there's really no competitive advantage in workplace road safety. It's a shared advantage because something you're doing out there can really benefit and save the life or change something in another organisation. And as it's a free open model out there, interactions unfortunately can lead to different fatalities in your own organisation just from people making mistakes on the road. And that's what we hope to sort of share and break down. When all of them accept, it's a long-term investment and it's all about people. And I guess a simple philosophy is if one company is facing an issue, you can guarantee there's many, many others are facing the exact same problem. So that's where the sharing power comes in and collaboration comes in. And the program is sort of broken into 2 sort of core pillars. There's around the corporate engagement, which is around knowledge transfer, and strategic facilitation, which is that data-driven collaboration. So when you begin looking at the corporate engagement, you can sort of seeing in this sort of area here, this is where we put lots of material out, content, case studies, quick facts, Q&As, toolbox talks, there's discussion papers, we do webinars, just like what Jess is holding us together now. All of it's free, open, and available for everyone. And a lot of things is the NRSP doesn't compete, we don't duplicate. You'll never see us run our own awards, we sort of piggyback with others. But what we'll do is we'll quite often tell the story as to why an organisation's won the award. And we sort of put that out there so they can have the floor space and they can share with others so they can then go through and so others can adapt and put it forward. And the aim is they can come back and share it back through the program so others can learn from what they've achieved. You go across the other side with our strategic facilitation. There's all sorts of little working groups, things which we're involved with. And we're very proud for all those different pieces, and I'll delve into a few more of them coming up. But once again, the key thing around them all is it's focused on bringing diverse groups together, having trusted forums where people can be open and honest about it, driven by data and collaboration and drawing in the evidence-based elements. And 2 two sort of examples which we have sitting here at the moment, I guess, is the used car safety ratings, which NRSP hosts that and looks after the program, which is delivered by Monash University Accident Research Centre. That was released a couple of weeks ago. And the other one is the Natasi Major Incident Investigation Report, which is funded by NTI, Australia's largest heavy vehicle insurer. They insure about 50% of the market. They provide us with all their data, and then we create this report for them and for the entire industry, which is really a temperature gauge of what's going on year. And just as some other outputs which we produce, as an example, the steep descents is something which we're just working through. The steep That's right. The steep descents is an example of something we've released recently, and we're releasing several of them coming up. That was only released like 3.5 weeks ago, 20,000 views. And the best thing about that is when you look at it, it's drivers talking to drivers. So it tells the story of how to safely navigate, I guess, the hill descents of the top ones throughout Australia, and all freely available. Now, I just want to touch on some working groups as examples. So this is one we've had going at the moment. This is what we call our Grey Fleet Working Group. Initially started in 2017. It was kicked off by a bank and some not-for-profits and a utility provider. When we developed this guide for them. You can see how it's based around a maturity curve approach. We then had organisations come back to us. There was a disability and a few others, basically 18 months ago, and revisited the whole model. There's now, I guess, 13 different measures. There's a new online tool. Once again, all this is freely available. And so organisations now can sign up to the NRSP. They go through a process called a PMAT, or they can use this tool freely online. And then you have all the resources you can possibly desire to help you build, I guess, a road safety culture around managing of your grey fleet. So this is only possible because basically we developed with 4 different focus organisations. They went in and delved into the whole sort of process. They tested it, we evaluated it, and we're closing it out. And we know it sort of works. And what it does is it systematically moves organisations, as you can see with the spider curve here. Obviously, when you see a printed out version, that's what the report gets spat out once you become a partner, which is all free. And it takes you through the journey of how it moves you systematically along with short, medium, and long-term approaches. So we've been testing this with organisations to make sure it works. This is another one, and I've mentioned around the power of contracts earlier. So this is called CLOCSA, or Construction Logistics Community Safety Australia. So we've adapted this from Transport for London over in the UK from their CLOCS program, which was created in response to the Crossrail project, which was a €55 billion project. And we've had this massive building boom going on throughout Australia. As Liz mentioned, there's one opening up here in Melbourne, but where these ones have been different is they've started bringing in standards for heavy vehicles. So now this is built into the National Road Safety Strategy Action Plan in Australia. So it's going to be a requirement for major infrastructure projects to have this standard built in, and then it'll flow through. This one had probably about 70 to 80 different businesses involved. It had 4 different technical groups. I led the communications one, but you can see the risk-based approach that it was taken and how we try and go through and set up a standard approach for any organisation to go through. And basically, once it's set in place, it sets a floor, and all of a sudden, there's no way that companies can come in. You can't undercut it. This is the requirement. If you want to operate these big projects, it can pull through the market. It gets the safer trucks, driver training, route planning, community education, all the way through. I'll just move through these last ones rather quickly, just so you get a bit of a view. With our toolbox talks, I mentioned, so toolbox talk is about a 15-minute delve-in topic, evidence-based, very engaging. Each one's standalone design. There's a whole lot of elements sit in there. All of these have been developed, and you can see this one here is around sun glare. This is fatigue, distraction. You can freely download all of these toolbox talks online. But where we go through and develop them, the heavy vehicle ones, this is what we did for them. We've done the same with light, and we've done the same with grey fleet. These are a lot of leading competitors in Australia, but they all came together and helped provide, I guess, the touch points to make sure that all these toolbox talks are grounded. Even though they have the resources themselves to do all this sort of stuff, what they found was our content's more engaging because it's evidence-based. It's not branded in their dry sort of content. It's also drivers from different companies are incorporated into the videos that gets the people to sit up And once again, it's drivers talking to drivers. And it had a whole life cycle process. And each of these are entirely different standalone presentations I can delve into. Um, the last one I just want to sort of touch on now is our forums. And I think this is a really powerful example of how you can bring together organisations, competitors, and those sort of groups to really share, I guess, good practice approach in workplace road safety. So initially, a utilities forum, it's been running for 11 years now. It's a benchmarking session. It's really evolved. It's based around emissions reporting that's compulsory in Australia now. We basically survey the drivers, survey the managers, survey the organisations. We have a Chatham House forum, and then they all share and collaborate and talk about who does what, why you perform over another. From that, we then spill out and we create what's called Q&As. They're topics which we delve into. We do quick literature reviews, talk to organisations, how they address those problems, and we create these papers. And I usually have summer interns that do that, and I have 3 this year working through. One's working with a major infrastructure project, another utility company, and similar. We then had someone who left the utilities forum and became head of safety at a major retail company. He said, I have no mates in workplace road safety, so he's asked us to set this up, which then led us to developing the Retail and Grocery Safety Forum. And that's hosted by EY and facilitated through their offices through the east coast of Australia and New Zealand. Meet twice a year. We have case studies, sharing that takes place. And you'll see a lot of the big and some of the small companies all coming together. About 20 to 30 will typically pop in. And once again, it's a sharing sort of approach. They design it and we sort of facilitate, pull together the case studies, themes, performance, and what we begin to see is crossover between these two. And then we have sort of other areas. So what I want to really highlight is at the heart of this is really organisations and businesses. They drive the program, they set the standard, they set what we look at. The Clocks A1, for example, that came out through a few different organisations asking for a gap. The Sydney Metro project that's been operating has mapped, I guess, the benefits for it enormously. Because any of these projects, when things happen, when businesses have an incident, it's enormous cost to them. And we'll have some case studies in the new year and webinars with some leading companies coming up, Essential Energy, Ausgrid, as examples, Uniting Communities, all these sort of ones which we freely sort of put out as well. You'll find the leaders will talk about how do they actually go about and do it. So I guess that's a breadth into, I guess, highlighting the power of partnerships, workplace road safety, collaboration. So if you want to see further information, this is what you can, excuse my cat's just got all in front. This is me, this is what you can see that we're up to at the moment.
Thank you so much for your great presentation, Jerome. And while you were definitely the star of the show, I think your cat was quietly sitting in the back, also taking some attention away from you and definitely wanting some attention at the end.
Thanks, Jess. The joys of work from home.
Great. And thanks for that presentation, Jerome. And I think your presentation really highlighted the power of collaboration, especially in the private sector. And I think there was one line that you said that really resonated with me, where you were talking about there's no competitive advantage in road safety. It's a shared advantage between all these private sector companies working together, which is a really powerful thing because we know that in the private industry, there is often a need for a competitive edge. But it's fantastic the companies that you've engaged in as a part of your program, where they're not using road safety as that competitive edge. I think in vehicle safety, we see a lot where we think it's fine for manufacturers to be, you know, making a profit because they are a business, but don't make safety as a part of that profit making. Safety should be a given. And I think having this sort of partnership really helps foster that collaboration where they are into sharing knowledge to make sure that we can keep everybody as safe as possible. So I think that was a really good example of private sector engagement and partnerships.
Yes, and I think that's actually a really good point because in some of our forums, for example, the moment you get these companies that begin talking around the why, how you engage, a lot of it's change management. And sometimes you'll hear manufacturers that say, oh, it's just happening to you. That's just your organization. But all of a sudden, they begin sharing. There's like 3 or 4 of them. Up top, an issue popped up, and they're like, oh, we got told it was unique to us. And all of a sudden, they're like, hang on, that's happening to us. That's happening to us. And I think when you've got 4, 5, 6,000 vehicles, even though you got size, a lot of people by nature are quite insular. I think once they begin
Mm,
talking to their peers, they learn a lot, and then they come up with even better ideas. That's the other part. I think it breeds better production, better ideas, better initiative, greater
mm.
innovation.
Absolutely. And maybe one quick question from me before we move to our next speaker. How many partners do you have as a part of the partnership program?
We had, before we went to the new model, which is just in the process of being launched, we had about 135 formally that are signed
Wow.
up, that have gone through the whole, and we're just about to go through a whole renewal process where we're about to start this new tool, which will be kicking off. It's sort of out, but it's in the testing phase at the moment. And once again, our goal from that is to help organisations measure their culture,
Mm,
see where they're sitting, and then have a plan and actions to fix it and come back and revisit it all the time. Because the hardest thing is a lot of companies and people can be overwhelmed by thinking there's so much to do, but really you just want to find your low-hanging fruit, have your plan, and just work through them. And that's what Hoping will assist
mm.
with.
Yeah, fantastic. And a big congratulations to you also, Jerome. I know you've built this program from the ground up, and getting over 130 corporate partners joining is no small feat. So well done to yourself and to your team. And hello to your cat.
Of course, it comes in the end. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you. And we'll invite you back later for our Q&A section. Fantastic. Mark, can we please bring up the results from the very first poll question? So, if you recall, the first poll question we asked was, which type of partnership do you think is most critical for road safety financing? And, you know, almost half said all of the above, which I would agree. Like there is a role for every type of partnership in road safety. And then following that, the government private sector one is also featuring very highly, which is very apt for the conversation that we're having as a part of this webinar session right now. So thank you for participating in that. And just one more poll question before we move to our next speaker. So, given that we have been talking a little bit about financing and how important it is to get different actors involved in financing road safety, our second poll question is really trying to gauge what type of funding mechanism do you think has the most potential for funding road safety in your country? So, once again, we've got a number of options there, but if none of them suit you, please do put your answer in the chat box. So while you're completing that, I have the very great pleasure of inviting our next speaker, Ken Nishino from the Almec Corporation, to also touch on the relationship between government and the private sector and how that can help increase road safety and vehicle safety. Very welcome, Ken, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to pass it on to you and welcome.
Thank you very much for the opportunity today. So I'm Ken Nishino from APRSO Corporation, of a consultant firm of traffic, transport, and urban planning. The title of my presentation is Traffic Safety for Commercial Vehicles through Government Private Sector Cooperation. I present example of basic approach of how traffic safety can be strengthened through partnership with the private sector using the project supported by JICA. This is the table of contents for the topic. So I present two examples of the JICA project in Thailand and then in Kenya from Africa. So traffic crashes by commercial vehicles. Traffic crashes involving commercial vehicles cause significant damage, including destruction of facility as well as fatality and injuries. They also negatively affect the reputation of the area and operator and the business sector. These crashes are mainly caused by big maintenance issues, overloading, long driving hours, and overspeeding. Commercial vehicles are mainly operated by private companies. However, government sector provides license or approvals for their operation. A license is required to operate commercial vehicles in order to fulfill several important objectives, including safety, fairness, public interest, road preservation, and industry oversight. Since commercial vehicles generate revenue, there's potential for cooperation with the government sector. However, if business conditions are poor, operator may neglect safety measures. Therefore, cooperation between government and the private sector is essential to ensure traffic safety. So I present the example JICA project. JICA implemented a traffic safety project in Thailand from 2020 to 2024. One of the key components of the project was enhancement of the Transport Safety Manager System, we call TSM system. The TSM system for fleet vehicle in Thailand was launched in 2023, and the JICA project supported its introduction by developing operator manuals and strengthening supervision skill. TSM is a qualified certificate for a person who supervise commercial vehicle drivers. The responsibility of TSM includes conducting vehicle check before operation, monitoring driver behavior, and verifying alcohol consumption and health conditions through roll call before operation, and analyzing cause of traffic crashes and preventing recurrence. Once operator properly follow the TSM system, the risk of the crashes will be reduced. And most of traffic crashes by flight vehicle in Thailand were caused by vehicle failures and human errors, as shown the figure left. We created the TSM operation manual, which covered vehicle maintenance, driver management, emergency response, and case study from Thailand and Japan. We also created instruction video to demonstrate TSM activities. It is expected that traffic crashes resulting from vehicle failure, overspeeding, drunk driving, and driver falling asleep, which account for 33% of traffic crashes involving fleet vehicles, can be reduced through this TSM system if the driver follows instruction of TSMs. And in the project, we selected 30 fleet operators and monitor effectiveness of introduction of the TSM system. And we evaluated using the GPS data provided from the operators. Reduction in traffic rule violation were confirmed for overspeeding, maximum driving time, and continuous driving time, as shown here. In addition, interview survey results for the operator indicate that 97% of the operator among the 30 operators are willing to continue this system. So here show the role of the regulator and operator. Government establish a system and make consensus with the private sector, issue certificate, provide support, monitor the operation, and improve periodically. An operator obtain the certificate, hire qualified staff, introduce a system, train the staff, monitor the operation. Also, introducing the TX system require cost, such as training qualified staff, installing equipment, recording data, and monitoring operation. Into implementation, create a positive cycle as shown here. Once a system in place, reliability improve, it lead increasing sales, and also it enhance the financial capacity of the operator, which make the cycle to improve the financial capability and also the able to be continue this system. Next is another project in Kenya, Nairobi. The modal share of the bus is very high at 41%, followed by walking at 40%. However, level of service of bus is very low in Kenya, Nairobi. Traffic crashes involving bus occur every day because drivers often race on the street to attract passengers. The regulator's role is limited to issuing operating license while operators run their business without any support from the regulator. As a result, there is efficiently no governance of the public bus sector. In the project, we propose clear role and responsibilities for both regulator and operators. Once key input was the introduction of an operational contract between the regulator and operators, in which the level of service, including operating hour, service frequency, fare range, and other requirements, is formally defined. A pilot project to improve bus operation through cooperation between the regulator and operator was implemented to demonstrate these proposed roles and responsibility in practice. The regulator prepared operation plan, crew working shift, wear chart, bus stop improvement, crew training, and operator provide the bus service based on the requirement. And in the project, we provided training for driver and contractor using this bus operator manual, and the driver conductor understand how to provide safe operation for passengers. And the effects of the pilot project were evaluated using the several indicators. 90% of the drivers reported that they paid more attention to traffic rule and passenger safety. And the passenger satisfaction regarding the traffic safety and driver behavior also improved significantly, as shown the figure on the right. These results show that the safety environment improved significantly through the provision of crew training. Also, the operational contract contains many elements that only a component provided to the crew in the pilot project was training, yet driving safety improved greatly. This demonstrates that even a small intervention by the government can have a substantial impact. Actually, there is a long history between regulator and operator in public transport sector in Nairobi. And both of the regulator and operator are aware that they need to cooperate. However, they do not trust each other and do not have opportunity to cooperate. The operator wanted to train their crew, but they didn't know how to conduct training. The crew also wanted to receive training to become professional drivers and conductors. The regulator developed a training manual and provide training to the operators. And this collaboration effort between regulator and operators contribute to improve traffic safety for professional drivers. And the level of service for bus operation and management in Nairobi remain low. However, safety can be improved through cooperation between the regulator and operators. This approach can also be applied in other cities. In both Thailand and Nairobi, the regulator created a simple framework for operators to implement safety measure requirement on a small budget. I hope this type of the cooperation can be expanded in as a developing country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Ken-san. And I think it's an excellent example of the type of partnerships that Jerome also highlighted as a part of his presentation. And I think these were a couple of really great case examples of how the private-public collaboration can help increase safety. And what you were talking about, like, the drivers and the private sector actually wants training. They actually want information, but they didn't know how. And this is where other partners and the government can also step in to help provide some of that training to help keep everybody safe. I think your example around commercial vehicles is especially important because we know that 1/3 of all global road deaths are because of people driving for work. So commercial vehicles is a very good example of people driving for work. You know, what you were talking about, you know, they contribute hugely to the fatalities and serious injuries that we see on our road because they're driving long hours, they're often not trained, they're not driving the right vehicles. So there's a huge, I guess, opportunity for us to do better in that commercial vehicle sector. And I think the example that you provided is one really good example of how we can make a bigger difference in that area. So thank you so much for that, Ken-san. I'll ask you to stay there, and while I bring up the results of our very last poll question, before we move into the Q&A. So the question was, which type of financing mechanism do you think has the most potential for funding road safety in your country? So the government public funding was the most popular, I think, in terms of which one has the most potential, followed by the private sector investment. So I guess in both of those, the either government or the private sector would have the biggest potential, I guess, for funding road safety activities in your country. So thank you for participating in that. So now I would like to take the opportunity to invite Jerome, Liz, and Ken-san back and join us for a question and answer session. And I continue to encourage you, if you've got any questions, please do type it into the Q&A box, or if you want to ask the question live of our speakers, you're welcome to raise your hand and Mark will help me identify who would like to speak, and we will unmute your mic and give you the floor. So maybe if I can just quickly go back to Liz and your presentation. I think you generated a lot of chat amongst the Q&A box, and thank you for answering some of the questions. And I think you mentioned like you collect a lot of data on your toll roads, you know, harsh braking and all that. There are a couple of questions related to that is like, how are you collecting that harsh braking data? And the second question is, do you actually share that data with other partners in the government?
And thank you. And thanks, Reza and Eric, for your questions. So the one that we're using when it comes to harsh braking, it's really out of modern vehicles. So vehicles that were manufactured probably from 2018 onwards that are run by a chip. So you're essentially driving around a large mobile phone. So you can be tracking. So we purchase licenses to a platform that is called Compass IoT. And it's an Australian startup, but they are operating, or they have the platform globally, so in Europe and also in the US. I'm not so sure about in Asian countries yet, but it will emerge. So we can look at any road. It could be where you live. It could be a motorway like ours, and it's very valuable for us because we have such high volume. So these vehicles probably make up about around maybe 10% of the Australian fleet, but because we have the high volume on our network, we can see those patterns and be able to do something about it. But that's what we're doing. So, and the vehicles, as I said, are sort of late model ones. And as vehicles are getting better and better, particularly the more high end ones that are, you know, so those features that are developed through the F1 or, you know, and are coming down into the fleet. And I think that the work that Jess and her team does around global NCAP is just critical because we learn so much around what can be done with the data. So that's where that comes from, and that's how we use it. And in terms of in context of the joint investment and determining whether stakeholders genuinely need to share data, I think that really goes to the heart of collaboration. So when you're looking at the safe system principles and road safety being a shared responsibility, where you're either providing funding in, then you may be able to determine or negotiate what data comes back to you. And as an offering at the other end, it can be, well, as we implement these interventions or as we track our fleet and the like, this is the data we can share back into government. Now, that can be anonymous it's anonymized data. We're not sharing license plates or of vehicles or anything like that, but we can, for instance, look at like on networks, and particularly in countries like yours, where there's high motorcycle usage, we get that data not through the near miss data or the connected vehicle data. We get that through our tolling points. So we can see how many motorcyclists are on the network, and they make up a very small proportion, but they're very overrepresented in our crash statistics. And other data that we're using now, we've got a research project occurring with in Queensland with MAIC, which is their Accident Insurance Commission, and the Queensland University of Technology Road Safety Collaboration. And because we can measure following distances, this is new. This is really new. We haven't been able to do that before because we have most of the crashes on our network, or the predominant crash type is rear end. People, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, through congestion or not seeing a build-up of traffic. So, and then there's, we can see as well the change in driver behaviour since the COVID pandemic. More aggression and things like that, and tailgating is one of those types of behaviours that we really want to be able to address in ways. So looking at that sort of data and sharing that with research institutes and then sharing it with government, we can together look at what the types of interventions, the education, the all sorts of things, roadside technology saying you're travelling too close, even directly in the future into vehicles saying you're too close to the vehicle in front. So there's these sorts of things that the research and data can inform.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Liz. And Jerome, maybe I'll turn to you for a second then. I think in one of your earlier slides, you were talking about how people drive as they live. So if we can actually increase how engaged they are, the meaning, the pleasure, and all that, that would increase their life satisfaction. And I think there was a question in the Q&A box asking, how do you actually measure satisfaction? Isn't it purely subjective?
That's a good question. Well, the research that was done was Isler in New Zealand. We did a webinar with him, was sort of really drawing it on. I think that involves a lot of pre-surveys, assessments, getting to know the sort of people. And I think that's how they were also going about. So from an organisational point of view, if we go and look at the Utilities Forum as an example, the companies that are involved in that, because we go out and we actually ask the workers, we engage them, and it's an independent third party, and all the data is de-identified. They know no one's going to find out what they say. They're very honest. And the key part then is what we do at the forum is the data then we present it back to them all. They have a dashboard. We develop actions with them, and they then spend time developing over the next 12 months. But a key part of that is getting the information back to the workers, so they're involved and they understand the why and their voice is heard. And I think that's a key part. They're involved because people just need to be respected, appreciated, engaged, have meaning, not feel like they're stretched, all those sort of components. And I think once that begins happening, that reflects through into how they sort of drive their vehicle, because you think about driving a vehicle, there's nothing, you can take out your anger in it, you can put your regret, you can do a burnout, you can accelerate, you can do these behaviours, and it can reflect how you're feeling. Your emotions can just flow through into how you drive. So I think it's a crucial thing, and that goes back to if you're going to call someone while they're driving, it's probably not the best time to give them some bad news or to have a go at them, those sort of things as well. I think that's from an organisational point of view, is they've got to engage and have conversations, have a driving community, have the workers have a voice. We have a great case study webinar with Osmos. I think if you want to go in to see our company really engages their workers, and I think they're probably one of the best I've seen in Australia.
Yeah, great. And Jerome, just going back to the early days of the National Road Safety Partnership Program, when you first started the program, was it difficult getting the private sector to engage?
It was really hard. It wasn't high on their agenda, on their calendar. But I think one of the key tipping points was probably getting a few of those big champions on board that help make the business case, like BHP, textbook example. obviously they got on board because they saved lives, but the other part is the numbers made sense. Like
Mm,
they worked out, they tested, went through an evidence-based approach, safe systems, those components. It was good business sense. And if people begin driving, it's like eco-safe driving. I think all the stuff coming in around emissions, if you drive the vehicle more efficiently and productive, all those sort of components, my God, it's safer to drive the vehicle. I think the moment you begin going through and doing that, because it's maintenance, it's operational, it's the basics. It saves a lot of money to a business, saves time, takes pressure. Your workers more engaged. I think it was all about getting a couple of key champions and using them as a
mm,
business case, and that people look through, respect, they're known, and them willing to put themselves out there. And I think now it's to the stage where it's a lot of people are willing to talk about it a lot more. And one of the lucky
mm.
things I have is a lot of people I engage with, they're all very similar. They're passionate, they want to make an impact, they want to do a difference, but they want to do it smartly and efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good example, though. Sometimes it's not easy to get the program off and running, but you just need a couple of champions to be able to assist you. And look at the National Road Safety Partnership Program now. It's grown to a network of over 130 members. So it may not be easy, but it can definitely be done. And I think that is a really good inspiration to other partners on this call that would be interested in doing something similar in your country.
There's a bit of a carrot as well. Like next year, we'll be releasing, adapting 13 of our top heavy vehicle toolbox talks into Arabic, China, simplified Chinese, and Punjabi. Um,
Mm,
the hard thing in that was trying to find found some great Punjabi champions for us. Hard in other sectors because a lot of New England, non-English speaking background Australians who are new, they don't want to put their head up above the parapet, and because there's a few things going here. And that's why we're
mm,
finding it a bit harder. But I think once again, once it begins and people begin
yeah,
engaging into it all, a lot of people are just overwhelmed by where to start. And I think it's just make a plan one step at a time. And talk. The other part is you're never alone. Talk to peers, talk to others.
mm,
That's the other
yeah,
part. People make a mistake trying to do it by themselves. That's really hard work.
yeah. No, that's a very good point. Like we go a lot further being able to partner up with like-minded people. So, Ken-san, if we can come to you, and I think there's been some really great comments about your presentation, about it being very useful set of examples that you provided. And, in terms of what Jerome was saying, sometimes it's quite difficult to get started. I'm just wondering about your experience in Japan with these private operators. Was it quite difficult at the start to get them engaged with the government and working hand in hand and collaborating to improve safety? Or did they really wanted that help? Or was it quite difficult to get them engaged?
Actually, so when the country I implement the project, so most of the driver, conductor, and the owners of the operator wanted to receive the training because they
Mm,
want to be a professional, but they don't
mm,
know how to get training, how to get knowledge.
mm,
So it's a good opportunity to cooperate with the government sector. Yeah, actually, so in most of the developing country, they don't have the good relationship between the government and the private sector, but they need to cooperate. They understand necessary cooperate to how we provide opportunity to start the cooperation activity. I think it's very important to make the first step.
yeah. And you think that this model of training with private operators and the government, that can be replicated in other areas of the world? I think there's a comment about this example can be done in Pakistan. The government in
Yeah.
Pakistan can work with the private
Mm,
sector to do something
mm,
similar.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I hope so. Yeah.
Great. And maybe like people can reach out to you for some more information if they need it. Um, Liz, there's lots of questions for you. I just want to come back. There's one around the inclusivity
Mm,
of toll roads. I think that often comes up. Obviously, toll roads means that people would have to pay to use them, and they are of a safer standard a lot of the time. But what about people that can't afford to use toll roads?
that's
What's your take
that's
on that?
Thank you. We've done some work and understanding the average amount that most people pay. And the last time I looked at this, and so it was a little while ago, it's about $10 per week. So not everybody is on them all of the time. So they're using them for particular purposes. So there's obviously people on the roads who use them regularly, and that's often work-related travel. And that's what the toll roads are really primed for, the freight task, and for those who are working and using the vehicle as a workplace, as Jerome has outlined in his presentation. So it's not everybody has this big cost burden for using toll roads. They're very convenient. Now, there are always options. There are other options that generally run in the same direction, which are state roads or public roads as well. But as you pointed out, Jess, we've said that ours are at least twice as safe as like roads. But we're measuring motorway to motorway rather than arterial to motorway. So,
Mm.
so again, we'd be probably a lot more safer than those. But what we do to improve the safety of the broader network is that we engage in partnerships. So we have a research partnership with Neuroscience Research Australia. They have a state-of-the-art crash lab, and they do research around occupants. So children in child restraints, which is fed into the standards and guidelines for Australia about how to transport children safely. More work has been done in that lab around transporting children with disabilities and medical conditions because there's been no research done about that. Older people and smaller people, the safety of occupants, and now they're moving into the positions of people as automated vehicles will come onto the market. So different areas of positioning. So that's, benefits the whole community, not just Transurban. And then we partner with organisations like Kids Safe or Safe Kids that operate globally, providing free child restraint checks and installations and the like. So we understand that not everybody can be on the toll roads all of the time, but we invest in community and societal programs and research that has the benefit for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
And
can I say
Jerome, did
one
you want to
comment?
add to that? Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
because I think there's one thing that Liz overlooks as well, the advantage of the roads, because they're nice, they're fast, and they're efficient. So yes, they're safer. But what that also attracts is like Liz said, it's a freight corridor, so it keeps a lot of the big vehicles, those sort of components, moving on the roads
Mm,
and keeps them off the
mm,
smaller arterial roads.
mm,
Because unfortunately, anyone involved in an incident with a truck, 5, 10 Ks, the truck's always going to win. So I think
Mm.
there's that benefit also of keeping everything concentrated in one area. That often gets overlooked as to how much of a flow on that provides the community as well.
And from an
yeah,
emissions point of view as well. So just as well. So there are lots of benefits, but it is we do understand around that inclusivity, and it's like everything in life that
mm,
that that we do our best to ensure that people can travel safely. And then, we do have programs, and I think this is really important for companies like ours that charge people to use the roads. Then we have hardship programs. We have a whole lot of things like that, so that
mm,
people who might get stuck or have an unfortunate event in their life, where they're struggling for whatever reason, that we really try to support them to manage those tolls over time and things like that. So I think that's very much these sorts of things provide that license to operate. So that makes a couple of things around trust with partners and the like. And these are the things that build that trust and the genuine and authenticity, the genuine approach to operating, and the authenticity about safety and for the community good.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm seeing a lot of questions and queries in the Q&A box that's talking about how can some of our participants reach out to all of our speakers today and collaborate and cooperate. And I think if you jump on the ALMEC Corporation website, the National Road Safety Partnership and Transurban, you'll be able to find a lot of the resources that our speakers have spoken about today. But in terms of opportunities for collaboration, I'm sure if you reach out to our speakers directly, they will be able to discuss with you directly on how potentially some of this information can be translated into your country's context. And, you know, I think a very big thank you to Liz and Jerome and Ken-san for spending the time with us today and sharing these great examples of the different types of partnerships, not just government to government, but government to private sector. Because we understand in road safety, you know, we can't just rely on one source of funding. We need also our public and our private sector partnerships to help generate that road safety demand and also generate the financing that we need. And I think all three speakers have given us some really great inspirations on how we can actually utilize the private sector to help generate that financing for road safety. So while they might not be able to directly provide funding for your country to help finance your road safety needs, I think if you can take the inspiration from how they've done it in their respective countries and take it back and apply it to your country's context, hopefully that will give you another way of thinking about how to finance road safety in your country. So I just want to take this opportunity to once again say a very big thank you to Liz, Jerome, and Ken-san. I know sometimes the hours of this webinar session is not so friendly from where you are joining us from in your part of the world, but we really appreciate you coming along and sharing your knowledge. So on behalf of everyone, a very big thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you
And
for having us.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you, everyone. Take care. Excellent. Chris, if we can just bring up the very last slides of the session. So as we move towards this is the third of 4 webinar sessions that we're having as a part of this third edition of the webinar series. We will be having one more before the end of the year, which we hope you'll be able to join us. When Chris is able to get the slides up, you'll be able to see that we do have one final session touching on innovative funding mechanisms for road safety. So once again, we've got some great speakers coming along just to talk about different ways that we can fund road safety that is a little bit outside of the traditional envelope, which is once again governments and all that. So please do join us for that very last session on the 16th of December. If you're able to, we would love to have you there. And Chris, are we able to bring up the very last poll question? Having a little bit of technical difficulty, but if we're not able to, that is fine. So apologies, looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, but that's okay. We hope to see you on the 16th of December and we'll love to see you there. So hopefully you can join us. Here we go. We've got the very last poll question coming up. It would be great if you can just let us know what did you find the most helpful in today's webinar session. This will then help us be able to form the next series and hopefully design it around what you found most helpful. And so Chris, are we able to bring up that last slide on the next webinar series, please? Sorry, these things never work as you want them to when you need them to, but no worries. So maybe we'll just leave it at that. So 16th of December, hope to see you online and for the very last session on innovative funding mechanisms. So once again, a very big thank you to all our speakers. I wish you all a lovely day and a lovely week, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jess. I'm going to jump so I can get in.